Every child knew about this. As he set foot on the island, Reynardo couldn't help feeling a bit curious. Was Lapino still waiting to be rescued? No. He was probably drinking champagne with the ravens. Did ravens drink champagne? Did rabbits? Reynardo felt oddly thirsty, come to think of it. Why had he chosen the Sky River? Two eyes good. One eye dead. The people who had built this castle, did they even know what monstrous weapon lay hidden within their walls? The Sky Ripper could destroy anything it touched, or so the legend said. As the Transcendent Emperor had fought the Lost Gods, thousands of thousands had died. But Reynardo had been through wars. The only merciful war was a short one. Stop. He was getting nowhere. Fast. Wasn't even trying anymore. As if it knew it had met its match. There it was. Sky Ripper's armature. The stuff that dreams are made of. Engineers' dreams. How is it part of a weapon at all? He'd have to ask a scientist. But first, he'd get the second piece. Sky Ripper had a heart. A core that had come to rest on the next island. Well, there was another island he could reach. Zenobia had just invaded it with her father's Raven battalions. She must be encamped there still. But fighting Zenobia now, that made no sense at all. He'd already sacrificed one friend to get this armature, was it? He didn't need to hurry to face her. She would find him. The truth is, though, he wanted to see her, wasn't it? It had been a dozen years since Swordfu School. He'd followed every rumor about her, every scrap of news. Not that he still loved her. After all, she was his enemy. No, it was solely because, know your enemy. All right, maybe he should stop pretending. He knew exactly how she felt about him. But their love affair always ended with a tragic death. Unless, maybe he could find a way to dodge tragedy. Surely he could, couldn't he? worse with Zenobia than he'd done with the core, could he? When I build my castle, thought Reynardo, all my gates are going to open with buttons, and all the levers will drop rocks at you. Reynardo wasn't entirely sure how he was going to capture Zenobia. She'd be expecting him. And he didn't have Lapino to cook up a clever plan. Why was it again that he hadn't got the core? Maybe because the results tended to be disastrous. These streets were familiar. The swordfish school was closed now. And he had been down that street 1,000 times. He knew that pub. He knew that alley. He knew the alley behind it much too. Reynardo slinked through Zenobia's ship, making no sound at all. Where were her guards? Finally...
That makes no sense. It's a trap,
shouted the Emperor.
I'll meet you at the outpost, and I'll bring my interrogators.
If Reynardo came face to face with the Emperor, maybe he could assassinate him. But maybe it would be smarter and safer to turn Zenobia against her father. What kind of proof could... She caught up with him. Don't you think I... The Emperor had learned enough secret from Reynardo to crush the rebellion. It would be a fair trade if the scientist could convince Zenobia to change side. These were no ordinary cannonballs. One thing, ordinary cannonballs were black. Fruit healing? Well, it was the latest fad, but it seemed to work. observatory was a burning hulk. Dead scientists and black feathers everywhere. The ravens had burned the I don't know. Let's go to the fleet and ask him.
Yes. I'll meet you on the mountains. There's something I have to get first.
But could he afford to meet her in the mountains? He'd given the Empire the location of the secret rebel base. They would need rescuing. Was it true? Was he on this adventure just to see Zenobia again? The Imperial heir was not an easy catch to see. She'd ignored all his quantitative. And on the other hand, trying to get a date by joining a war against your intended was, let's see, pretty optimistic. Even on the back paw, thought Reynardo. Yes, it sounded exactly like him. Good, I'm so glad we had this little chat, he told himself. There were a lot of dead ravens along the side of the road. Someone had rampaged through here on a killing spree.
What had Zenobia gone to get? The chilling feeling. It was the Iblis stone. Zenobia was level. Stones will make anyone bloodthirsty. You could tell her style from the blade work on the dead birds. Reynardo wondered what he should do when he found Zenobia. What could he do if she had the Iblis stone? He reached the summit, expecting no one. But there she was, steaming, pacing.
I'm gonna kill him, she said. I'm gonna kill all his ravens, and then him, and then his family, and all the eggs and tadpoles. And then I'm gonna burn down their pond. Did you go and get the Iblis stone? Do you see all these ravens I killed? So much power.
Yeah. Great, Reynardo said.
You really want power from a demonic rock? You want the stone, don't you?
Not really.
Good. I'd rather not have to kill you. He told her he loved her. That he wouldn't let the Iblis stone take her, even if he had to die for it. Well, he planned to tell her. Now didn't seem like the right time. she'd probably cool off in a bit. So he let her get in her ship and fly off. He rushed back to the Farfarer and followed her, keeping a healthy distance. Zenobia's ship was just visible through the clouds ahead. How could he reason with her? But he had to. The rebels were down for the count. No wonder. He'd betrayed the location of their base and then he'd abandoned them. And if she became Empress while she was in the grip of the Iblis Stone, if she became Empress by murdering her father, she could still be a great Empress. But she could also be a nightmare Empress. She had to be stopped. There were more dead ravens along his path, some of them wounded in the back. He knew she could have easily talked her way past them, or clouded the little tiny raven brains with a spell. She was going out of her way to kill everything in her path. This wasn't Zenobia, not as he knew her. Reynardo had a feeling that was the back door to something. But what? So, his beloved was possessed by the spirit of a demon. That's what it meant to be a hero. To brave the darkness in your loved one's soul. To have faith there was still good in her. To help her out of that darkness, no matter what the cost. But what? What could he do? She'd kill him if he tried to take the Iblis Stone from her. At the end of the trail of raven corpses was Zenobia. Her father was frantically rigging a strange apparatus wrapped around a glowing core. "Don't do it!" he shouted. "You'll hate yourself in the morning! Stay back!" She screamed in a horrible voice he'd never heard before. It froze him in his tracks. The Emperor stared at him. "Run!" he told the toad. "Or hop!" But he didn't manage to voice it, only think it. Zenobia stabbed her blade forward, and His Majesty fell dead. She began laughing hysterically. Or was she weeping? "Just walk away," she laughed at him. "I've no more use for you." There was something he needed to do, but he couldn't figure out what it was. So he did as he was told. As he walked away, he felt a chill in the world. The light in the sky seemed to dim. He didn't dare turn. He had a nagging feeling there was something he should have done just then. something heroic. But he could not have taken the Iblis stone from her by force, and she would not have parted with it willingly. A cold wind blew from where she had been, but he still didn't dare turn. And then, an awful laughter filled the air, and all the torches and all the ships went out, and he realized what he should have done. But by then, it was too late to do anything. Oh, again? But he already had all the secrets he needed. He was sure of that. He must have not used them the right way. What was the best, worst mistake he could make? Probably trusting that traitor Lupino. The book's The clouds parted over the Isles of Boreas. It was time to choose. The rebellion was in trouble. Ravens were scouting for the secret rebel base. They needed a game changer. Pieces of the Sky Ripper had surfaced. Reynardo knew that using it could go catastrophically wrong, but he was sure he could figure out how to use it safely. Also, a temple had risen out of empty desert. The Iblis stone was hidden there. It was a dangerous artifact. It could corrupt its user into a bloodthirsty monster. Maybe he could find a way to use it, to take its power without surrendering to its wickedness. And also, his old friend Lupino needed rescuing. Of course, Reynardo had a pretty strong suspicion that Lupino had betrayed the rebellion, and he had a gut feeling that he needed to use that to his advantage. As he set foot on the island, Reynardo couldn't help feeling a bit curious. Was Lupino still waiting to be rescued? No. He was probably drinking champagne with the ravens. Did ravens drink champagne? Did rabbits? Reynardo felt oddly thirsty, come to think of it. Why had he chosen the Sky Ripper? Reynardo never made plans that required constant vigilance. He was a hero. He didn't think too much. He just went with his gut and hoped it all worked out. The Sky Ripper was a long shot. He'd have to devote himself to it. No side journeys, no rescuing old friends. That was against his nature. Could he stick with it?
You guys ever wonder why the Imperial Rangers are always hiring?
That had been his mistake before, thinking he could win a battle of wills with an ancient evil all by himself. He had to be cleverer than that, or braver, or something. Reynardo was looking for a big chest. Wait, that didn't sound right. You blinked.
What was the point of this gate? Did they think no one would notice the lever?
There it was. Sky Ripper's armature. The stuff that dreams are made of. Engineers. How is it part of a weapon at all? He'd have to ask a scientist. But first, he'd get the second piece. Sky Ripper had a heart. A core that had come to rest on the next island. Well, there was another island he could reach. Zenobia had just invaded it with her father's Raven battalions. She must be encamped there still. But fighting Zenobia now, that made no sense at all. He'd already sacrificed one friend to get this armature, was it? He didn't need to hurry to face her. She would find him. Reynardo. The truth is, though, he wanted to see her, wasn't it? It had been a dozen years since Swordfu School. He'd followed every rumor about her, every scrap of news. Not that he still loved her. After all, she was his enemy. No, it was solely because, know your enemy. All right, maybe he should stop pretending. He knew exactly how she felt about him. But their love affair always ended with a tragic death. Unless, maybe he could find a way to dodge tragedy. Surely he could, couldn't he? He couldn't do worse with Zenobia than he'd done with the core, could he? These things really slice like ham. Reynardo wasn't entirely sure how he was going to capture Zenobia. She'd be expecting him. And he didn't have Lapino to cook up a clever plan. Why was it again that he hadn't got the core? Maybe because the results tended to be disastrous. These streets were familiar. The Swordfu School was closed now. He had been down that street 1,000 times. He knew that pub. He knew that alley. Reynardo slinked through Zenobia's ship, making no sound at all. Where were her guards? Finally...
That makes no sense. It's a trap,
shouted the Emperor.
I'll meet you at the outpost, and I'll bring my interrogators.
If Reynardo came face to face with the Emperor, maybe he could assassinate him. But maybe it would be smarter and safer to turn Zenobia against her father.
What?
She caught up with him. scientists at the observatory had a true witness to one of the Emperor's blasphemous rituals. The dead could be made to speak for a short while. Interestingly, they could not be made to lie. After all, what do they have to lose or gain by lying? A cannon trap. Who doesn't love being shot at by cannons? And who kept these things loaded anyway? This chest smelled kind of funky. He hoped he didn't get it in his clothes. The observatory was a burning hulk. Dead scientists and black feathers everywhere. The Ravens had burned the I don't know. Let's go to the fleet and ask him. Yes. I'll meet you on the mountains. There's something I have to get first. But could he afford to meet her in the mountains? He'd given the Empire the location of the secret rebel base. They would need rescuing. So he had given the Sky Ripper's core to the Empire. He felt stupid about that. He hoped the Emperor didn't bring the Sky Ripper against the base. There was nothing he could do to fight a legendary weapon. Reynardo hated when he screwed up. One of these days, he would learn to look before he pounced. But today is not that day, he intoned for his own amusement. Reynardo decided not to tell the Council he'd given the Empire Sky Ripper's core and the location of the secret base. They needed him in battle, not in the brig, right? The Raven was slumped in a pile of its own feathers, like a tree in November.
You can't stop us. The Emperor has a weapon no warrior can defend against.
What happened to you? Reynardo asked. But the Raven chose that moment to go to the great nest in the sky. So they'd made the cord into a weapon. That wasn't good. Hey, why don't you guys fight in groups? Oh, I know. Because there's no I in team. Long stairs. So he was close to the rebel base. Nothing was on fire. So far, so good. Reynardo had never slain so many ravens. The secret base was going to stink of burnt feathers for months. The council speaker was confused.
Our spies say Zenobia has gone berserk. She attacked and destroyed an entire squadron of dropships.
This was amazing good news. He'd shown her the Emperor's evil. Now she'd gone over to the rebel side. Now is our moment. Attack! Reynardo exulted. They could win this thing. Zenobia commanded half the fleet. Who would follow the mad Emperor when they could follow his heir, who was wise and smart and a brilliant sorceress besides? But what about the core and the Iblis stone? What evil could the Emperor wreak with those?
As he closed in on the Imperial fleet, Reynardo liked his odds.
Oh, how had he gotten into this mess? He'd never set out to be a hero. When he was a kid, he'd wanted to be a great cat burglar, until his mother had explained about foxes and cats. And then the Emperor had gone mad and started sacrificing kittens to the lost gods. There were a lot of dead ravens here. Who had slain them? There it was again. The back door to the portal that went to the center of the fleet. There were raven bodies everywhere. The precision of the wounds. Reynardo recognized her style.
It appeared that she was single-handedly turning the tides of the battle.
Good.
That left the Emperor with only the core. Against him, all the rebels, his daughter, and her will. He wished he was fighting alongside her. But they'd meet up soon enough.
Soon he'd confront the Emperor. Funny that this whole war had come about because the Emperor feared death. And now he was coming for him. There was some sort of lesson there, wasn't there? Zenobia was cutting down the Emperor's bodyguard like they were mushrooms. The Emperor was frantically readying some arcane instrument, brass and hammered steel wrapped around a glowing, thrumming sphere. Skyripper's core. Zenobia! Reynardo shouted. But he had no idea what else to say. Revenge! She shouted as she cut the last bodyguard down. A ray lanced out of the sphere. Everything around her burst into flames, but her sword seemed only to absorb it. She walked towards Isengrim III like she was walking against a river. Nothing could stop her. They were going to win. Zenobia stabbed the Emperor dead and flicked the moaning apparatus off. She was laughing hysterically. Or weeping, maybe. They had won. He ran to her. I killed my own father. She wept, and he held her. He told her he loved her. He would pull her back from the brink of madness. But the core thrummed louder and louder. At that moment, Reynardo understood that the core was going to explode catastrophically, and that this could have been victory. The Emperor and his daughter dead, the fleet destroyed. He'd almost been a hero. A legendary one, maybe, if only he and the rebel fleet hadn't been here. Oh, again? But he already had all the secrets he needed. He was sure of that. He must have not used them the right way. What was the best, worst mistake he could make? Probably trusting that traitor Lupino. The book's pages fluttered to the beginning once again. Faster than before? And he fell. The clouds parted over the Isles of Boreas. It was time to choose. The rebellion was in trouble. Ravens were scouting for the secret rebel base. They needed a game changer. Pieces of the Sky Ripper had surfaced. Reynardo knew that using it could go catastrophically wrong. But he was sure he could figure out how to use it safely. Also, a temple had risen out of empty desert. The Iblis stone was hidden there. It was a dangerous artifact. It could corrupt its user into a bloodthirsty monster. Maybe he could find a way to use it, to take its power without surrendering to its wickedness. And also, his old friend Lupino needed rescuing. Of course, Reynardo had a pretty strong suspicion that Lupino had betrayed the rebellion, and he had a gut feeling that he needed to use that to his advantage. Every child knew about the Sky. As he set foot on the island, Reynardo couldn't help feeling a bit curious. Was Lupino still waiting to be rescued? No. He was probably drinking champagne with the ravens. Did ravens drink champagne? Did rabbits? Reynardo felt oddly thirsty to think of it. Why had he chosen the Sky Ripper? Reynardo never made plans that required constant vigilance. He was a hero. He didn't think too much. He just went with his gut and hoped it all worked out. The Sky Ripper was a long shot. He'd have to devote himself to it. No side journeys, no rescuing old friends. That was against his nature. Could he stick with it? That had been his mistake before, thinking he could win a battle of wills with an ancient evil all by himself. He had to be cleverer than that, or braver, or something. Rosebud, he said to no one in particular as he died. There it was, Sky Ripper's armature, The stuff that dreams are made of. Engineers dream.
How is it part of a weapon at all? He'd have to ask a scientist, but first, he'd get the second piece. Sky Ripper had a heart, a core that had come to rest on the next island. Well, there was another island he could reach. Zenobia had just invaded it with her father's Raven battalions. She must be encamped there still. But fighting Zenobia now, that made no sense at all. He'd already sacrificed one friend to get this armature, was it? He didn't need to hurry to face her. She would find him.
He looked up at the old trees around him. They were so big and so old. They'd been there before he was born, and they'd be there after he'd passed into legend. Was he confronting his own unimportance? What had got into him? He was no philosopher. Anyway, who cares? He was plenty important. He was a hero.
There was something sour in the air. Like the earth had ruptured over something that had been fermenting for a very long time.
Boy, if only you had some sort of gun that made portals. There were fewer and fewer trees. There were only these huge crystalline growths. Had those been here before? He no longer heard birds except for the feverish cawing of the ravens when they attacked. He couldn't smell the small animals of the forest. The mice, rabbits. Where had they gone? And he was getting hungry too. This was an unhealthy place to be. The 20-sided core made him feel physically sick. Once he had sneaked into a temple of the dark arts, and he hadn't liked... He carried his prize back to the Farfarer. Now, he had to make his next move. There was a key Imperial outpost on the Nexus. If this really was some sort of super weapon, he could use it to wreak havoc on the enemy. And if it wasn't, well, better to know that before the final battle. But maybe he should show it to some scientists first. There was an observatory on the Nexus. Maybe he should go there before he fired it. As he set out down the path, Reynardo wondered why the parts of the Sky Ripper had only surfaced now, thousands of years after the Transcendent Emperor had discarded it. This Emperor, Isengrim III, had performed terrible, bloodthirsty rituals to invoke the lost gods. Perhaps that was bringing up lost artifacts. How perfect, then, that the Sky Ripper would reappear to be his destruction. And, hopefully this time, just his destruction. Ooh, sparkly, thought Reynardo. Tired of slaughtering ravens. Maybe it was time to test out the new weapon. He turned a knob on the Sky Ripper. Reynardo had never met a weapon without a trigger or a handle. How did this thing work? Sky Ripper was making a whining noise now, and its wheels were spinning so fast he could no longer see them.
Reynardo had a thought.
Yeah, sure it will, cracked Reynardo. Pull the other one.
If you don't trust me, go see Calaveras. He'll tell you the same thing.
Oh, she would say that. That sounded sensible. Why did she always have to sound sensible all the time? Oh, it was infuriating.
Of course she would say that. He was supposed to hurry and bring the Sky Ripper to the council so the rebels could actually win the war. But what if she was right?
Damn it. Imperials were flapping and cawing all around the ruins. They must be panicking with rumors flying of the superweapon. Maybe they hoped to find and destroy the base before he could put the Sky Ripper into action. The Sky Ripper was whining and heating up. It would be time to use that energy soon.
It was the craziest weapon he'd ever used. Or not used. He wondered if the council knew he destroyed the outpost. He hoped so. He was excited. With his superweapon, they could actually win their battle with the Imperial fleet.
What was Zenobia talking about? This was a fantastic weapon. Ravens burst into flames with just a touch of its killer beam. He was tempted to leave it on all the time, but he didn't want to accidentally slice off some council toad's head or tongue. She'd been trying to distract him. Well, this time, no one was going to distract him.
Long stairs. So he was close to the rebel base. Nothing was on fire. So far, so good. As he headed towards the council chamber, Reynardo felt everyone watching him.
You've saved the rebellion, said the council speaker. Frankly, we were afraid you'd turn aside to save that idiot Lapino.
Not bloody likely, Reynardo told them, feeling he was maybe being a bit harsh on the poor mad rabbit.
If you never make sacrifices, he said, you're probably not doing the right thing. The speaker nodded.
Are you ready to lead the charge?
Let's roll, he said, with grim satisfaction. Reynardo set sail for the fleet. The Sky Ripper had lost its whine. It was humming now, as if it had taken some time to seat properly. He had always been irresponsible. This time, he'd done the right thing, made the hard decisions. He was a real hero. He hadn't let himself be distracted by old friends or old lovers turned enemies. Finally, he could be proud of himself.
He was ready. So was Sky Ripper. The Sky Ripper had a will of its own. It picked out its own targets and set them on fire.
This was going to be a short battle.
He would set the ships on fire if he didn't need them to get to the Emperor. And he wondered if he'd see Zenobia, or if she'd flee. Wouldn't she be proud of him? At least, a bit of respect. He'd become an all-conquering hero.
There was a parchment on a signpost. It was from her.
Every time you fire, you risk the destruction of the universe. That's insane. We surrender.
He'd done it. He'd played chicken with Zenobia and won. He could hear the horns blaring the retreat. She was wiser than he was, that was for sure. But wisdom didn't win battles.
Bowman right by his side. And there was Zenobia, wearing the white robes of surrender. She came and kneeled before him. Why didn't you listen to me? I was trying to save you too. You're the enemy, you said. I was never your enemy, Reynardo.
And he realized, not for the first time, how much she loved him.
Then she spoke a terrible word and made a gesture with her hand. She stopped moving, covered in frost, and he wondered why she'd frozen herself. Then the Sky Ripper froze, and then, for a moment, he felt very cold and discovered that he couldn't move. The next thing he knew, the sun was a giant, monstrously red. It took up half the sky, and he was in a parched red desert. And then he was on fire.
Oh, again? But he already had all the secrets he needed. He was sure of that. He must have not used them the right way. What was the best, worst mistake he could make? Probably trusting that traitor Lapino. The book's pages fluttered to the beginning once again. Faster than before? And he fell. The clouds parted over the Isles of Boreas. It was time to choose. The rebellion was in trouble. Ravens were scouting for the secret rebel base. They needed a game changer. Pieces of the Sky Ripper had surfaced. Reynardo knew that using it could go catastrophically wrong, but he was sure he could figure out how to use it safely. Also, a temple had risen out of empty desert. The Iblis stone was hidden there. It was a dangerous artifact.
It could corrupt its user into a bloodthirsty monster. Maybe he could find a way to use it, to take its power without surrendering to its wickedness. And also, his old friend Lupino needed rescuing. Of course, Reynardo had a pretty strong suspicion that Lupino had betrayed the rebellion, and he had a gut feeling that he needed to use that to his advantage. Reynardo finally realized that Lupino was a traitor to the cause, and maybe Reynardo could use that somehow. Reynardo couldn't quite put his paw on when he'd realized Lupino was working for the Empire. He'd never exactly seen Lupino sending coded messages to the palace, but he was sure. The rabbit had been on too many disastrous missions where he was the only survivor, or where he accidentally missed getting on the boat that went down to the abyss in flames. If Reynardo could prevent Lupino from getting back to the fleet with all the intelligence he'd probably gathered, it might be worth the trip. How had they come to this? They'd been on so many adventures together. Lupino had talked Reynardo out of prison at least 4 times, and Reynardo had rescued Lupino from at least 2 lynch mobs. He'd always felt that the rabbit resented him. Lupino was hilarious because he was so down on himself and everyone else. But behind the laughs, he wasn't a happy camper. Oh, was this payback? Or did the Empire have his little white tail in a vice? Ravens were landing everywhere from dropships. He'd better get moving. If they got to Lupino first, the rabbit would give the Empire all the intelligence he'd been stealing from the rebellion, and they'd probably give him a medal. He'd have to be very careful about how he played Lupino. At the slightest hint of danger, the mad rabbit would take off like a rabbit. Bloody and exhausted, Reynardo finally reached Lupino. The rabbit was practicing shuffling his favorite deck. Now, I am. The ravens are coming. Now, I got a clever plan to kidnap Zenobia. Reynardo wanted to clap shackles on the rabbit and shout, "You're a traitor, and I'm not falling for it." But if there was one thing Reynardo was sure of, it was that the core of the Sky Ripper was dangerous mostly to its user. If he could put it in the Emperor's hands, old Isengrim III might blow himself and his fleet up with it. Yes, that was it. Right. Now, all Reynardo had to do was fight his way through Zenobia's invading troops, sneak onto her ship and into her bedroom, and kidnap her without any of her dozens of guards alerting her. Then, he would rely on her love for him to convince her how evil her father was, so she'd run away with him instead of going back to her father, who was going to blow himself up. It did sound a little risky. But Reynardo had a feeling it would work out somehow. It always did. Reynardo was halfway to Zenobia's encampment when Lupino showed up. He was disheveled and distraught.
They jumped us. I barely got away.
Oh, they got the core.
Oh, it was all going according to plan, thought Reynardo. Now he just needed Zenobia on his side.
Yes, that was even better. The Iblis Stone.
Zenobia could get it. And then the Emperor would have to pursue them. Wait. No. The gem would corrupt anyone. Even her. That's it, he thought. Even Lupino. Even though Lupino was already a traitor. It would turn him against his secret master, the Emperor. He would try to make himself Emperor. And the Emperor would have to defend himself with the core. Boom. He was a super genius.
This is terrible, Reynardo told the rabbit. If only I had gone for the Iblis Stone. But now it's lost in enemy territory. He handed Lupino a map. It gives the bearer so much power. We can only hope the Emperor never finds it.
What was that? Said Lupino. I think someone's following us.
I didn't hear anything.
Rabbit ears. You go on ahead. I'll check it out.
And with that, Lupino hopped off with the map. Okay, let's get this over with and we can all go home. Well, not you, just me. Reynardo slinked through Zenobia's ship, making no sound at all. She was curled up on her bed. He'd forgotten how beautiful she was, how sleek, how soft. He tapped her on the shoulder with his sword. She was made of smoke, and he noticed he had a very solid blade to his throat. "Did you really think you could capture me?" purred a familiar voice. "I just wanted to chat," said Reynardo. "Did you ever wonder why the Emperor adopted you? He needs a sacrifice, someone who truly loves him, to make a bargain with the lost gods."
That's a vicious lie.
He wants to bring them back. That's crazy. Why would anyone... They could make him immortal. An eater of souls. And with that, her eyes widened. She understood. Reynardo told her how he had rescued a priest whose order had been massacred, how he had slept in a burnt village. At midnight, the Emperor's victims had come to him in his dreams to tell him of the hideous eldritch rituals they'd been sacrificed in. He could still see those kittens and puppies, their wide, sad eyes, their moist noses. "You can't prove that." "I've got a witness at the observatory." He couldn't tell her.
Don't you think I'd know if my father started practicing black magic?
The rebellion had started after atrocities that the Empire hushed up. Reynardo had rescued a priest whose order had been massacred for one book. He had slept in a burnt village. Dead kittens and puppies had come to tell him what the Emperor had done to them.
This was a roundabout way of getting there. Reynardo was making himself dizzy. Fun!
The observatory was a burning hulk. Dead scientists and black feathers everywhere. The Ravens had taken special care.
So, Reynardo explained his brilliant gambit. Sending Lupino to get the Iblastone, become super powerful and corrupted, provoke the Emperor into using the core against him, thus blowing up both of them, and hopefully the fleet too. "Let me visit your council," she said, shaken. "I want to help."
Could he really trust her?
What had Zenobia gone off to do? What was more important than meeting the rebel council? Had he made a mistake, sending her to the ruins? No. He knew they could trust each other. He could trust her because she never broke her word. She could trust him because she could see right through him. Well, she'd probably be there well before him. She at least didn't have to fight her way through rainstorms of ravens. As he came around the bend, there was Lupino, unconscious on the side of the path. And Reynardo could smell a familiar, sweet, smoky scent. Who? Zenobia. It had to be. She never used a combat spell when she could use drowsy gas. That meant she had the Iblastone. What would it do to her? She hated her father now. She'd kill him for sure. The council wouldn't mind if she killed the Emperor, but murdering her father would destroy her. He had to get to whatever ledge she was on and talk her down from it. Long stairs. So he was close to the rebel base. Nothing was on fire.
So far, so good.
Everyone in the council chamber was dead. Zenobia stood shivering in the courtyard, drenched in blood. Why? He managed. They started arguing with me. I lost my temper and I wanted their blood. Well, not me. The stone did. Why did you take it from Lupino? I had a plan. You had a stupid plan, she said. I'm going to go kill my father now. No, you can't. You'll just take his place. You'll become worse than him. Get out of my way, or I'll kill you too. You won't kill me, he said. And I won't let you kill the Emperor. Enraged, she raised... The Empire had seized his ship. They'd have to take it back. Reynardo had a feeling that was the back door to something. But what? And there it was. Any better when you're dead. But they did not go unnoticed. Scout ships lifted off, and the long lance of the Imperial flagship. Reynardo turned downwind to gain speed. The Raven ships could pursue, but they couldn't close. The Farspeaker croaked,
You return her and live!
"Go sacrifice yourself," yelled Reynardo.
Then you won't have her either.
On the flagship, the Emperor was readying some arcane weapon. It couldn't be. It was the core. A devastating beam lanced out of the flagship. Reynardo zigzagged wildly to keep the Farfair out of it. Now the Raven scout ships were closing the distance, and the beam was getting closer too. Then came a blinding flash, and the air was searingly hot all around him. There was a thunderous, deafening roar. He could smell burnt oak and burnt feathers and burnt flesh. But when he could hear and see again, they were alive and unhurt. And they were alone in the sky. Zenobia embraced him. They had done it. Through luck and through love, they had won the war. "Avalon, here we come," he said as he held her arms wide in the prow of the boat and let her feel its speed. "Maybe the real Avalon is wherever we're together," she said. And so, after a bit of an argument, Reynardo and Zenobia went to one of the two Avalons. The one shrouded in mists, or the one in their hearts. But which one they went to, I'll never tell. He'd done it. He'd forged his own destiny. Well, he hadn't actually done it, but he knew what he would do. Reynardo smiled at the book. He practically wanted to kiss it. The kid's sacrifice hadn't been in vain. He'd saved the book and saved the world. Reynardo owed him and his mother so much. Reynardo lowered the mainsail and let the Farfarer shoot forward in the breeze. Second star to the right, and straight on till morning. This time, he would win.